artwork can put you at ease. You know, you're in a nice, polite, white cube that you go into, and it's very quiet, and you can kind of experience these objects or these works. There's just a meditative quality to like being around art. If you apply that to the way you can manipulate materials and paint and certain objects, you can kind of put them in positions and juxtapositions, and like just, they work for you, and they kind of like, there's something that happens that kind of conveys certain ideas, or it's just this works as a sculpture. I have an understanding of what my work's about, but then I kind of like not giving away too much, that I like someone else maybe telling me, or someone else kind of informing you about what connections they make, and it's kind of then that will lead it on and kind of make a, I think, for more of an interesting experience as well, that I kind of like being led and trying to explore and not locking things down too much. You're like, my work's specifically about that. You want to kind of, I like to be excited, I like to go out and find things. I grew up quite close to the beach in Birchington-on-Sea. There's Birchington, Westgate and then Margate. So I kind of went out in Margate, went to school in Margate, but I didn't live in Margate. I moved a few times, but I always stayed in Minnis Bay, which is just down from Birchington. I'd like take pictures of a lot of that coast and the walls and the kind of the aspects of the promenade. I don't know what you necessarily know what you're going to do with them. You just take shitloads of photographs and then you kind of just filter them through later on. Sometimes I'll print them out, so then you physically start using these images. They might get collaged, or I might just have them as an image that gets put into a folder, or it might just, I don't know, it might just sit there and nothing happens to it. You can draw from something that happened last week, and then you can draw from something that happened 15 years ago. And I think like gaining some form of knowledge through collecting and understanding things visually is like quite an interesting way of doing it, I guess. It's understanding where you've come from and where you're going as well. And then like kind of seeing it as a whole. You know, it's something you build up these patterns, and you build up these kind of recurring kind of themes, I guess. And that's like partly because of the book, that they help you kind of develop these ideas, as opposed to just having like, I mean, it seems like endless kind of images, but you realise over time that you start making a connection with certain shapes and certain ideas and certain themes that you kind of, you know, you become aware of your own thoughts, I guess. There's a mix of kind of different things going on. There's a bit of a playfulness, and there's maybe a narrative that builds alongside each thing. So you need one that kind of feeds the other, that it's not too driven, just, there's a bit of chance. It's just having like all these images. This is where the collages start. It's just, you start with a background and you start just working with what's there. And I think it's kind of quite freeform. See where the work's going to go next, and I've already kind of done a certain sense of like groundwork where I've like decided where I'm, what imagery I'm picking out. And the boxes have various, some of it's used in the sculptures, and some of this is just maybe for future things, or maybe they just work within a whole. So, right, just a Red Bull jug. These like glass poos that I had made, kind of, I only describe them as that. A mix of bits. That's like, our fruit. Lots of fruit in these chubby drinks I've kept. Wooden stuff, lots of wooden things. Certain things I've had a few and I've used them in works, and certain things I just, for some reason, I'm like, they're for keeping. Certain objects work on certain shapes, and certain things are just very intuitive. Again, very similar thing that's happening within the collages, that you build these things up, you start collecting this material, and it's a way of kind of working through it all. Having something quite formal, this grid, but kind of breaking it up, and it's really quite cheap, so it was kind of quite accessible to use. It didn't become quite precious. It kind of enabled you to kind of be quite free with it, to kind of build things upon, kind of build these narratives and these ideas, and just to play around sculpturally. They kind of like physically, they worked really interesting, and it was something that had, something you could continuously play with and build upon. It was like a ground for it to kind of, it was something to start working with these like objects and other material that I kind of wanted to use. But then, you know, you might lay it out, weld it, get it up, have a look at it, and it kind of, they're continuously ongoing, that you kind of cut them up and re-weld. And over the last like few years, they've been kind of editing out the middle of them and having this, I guess I kind of see it as like this window you're kind of looking through the work. There's a lot of different connections with black holes and kind of negative space. I think there's something interesting going on with these windows and using these windows as a thing you're kind of looking into, and there's a window, you can almost like look, you look out of them, you look into them, and you kind of then project your own thoughts on them, and when you're kind of stuffing them, filling them with kind of objects, you're kind of clouding that viewing platform. The first series, I guess a whole series of them I'd done stemmed from these walks and these journeys that I was going on. Now they're kind of like evolved a bit more into being just standard works on their own that can kind of hold their own kind of narrative and ideas within them, I guess. I kind of sticking with the initial way that I worked, with just a singular hole in the top and working through a small kind of tight space. I know what colours I want to put in, and I know what objects I want to put in, but there's only so much you can do within a small space, and it kind of limits your kind of control of the paint, with like the size of the stick that I maybe use. There's so much chance and not knowing how a kind of a paint will hold or work with another colour. Because of the scale of the Baltic, I was able to enlarge the grids somewhat, a little bit bigger than what I usually work with, and you're able to kind of play around a little bit more, I think. And the bags themselves, like, I guess it comes down to like more of a, not time travelling, but more just travelling in general, and what they kind of speak of on the imagery that's on there about seeing the world, and kind of these world maps and like happy world, and these kind of weird things that you kind of like combining this imagery, and it's almost seeing it like, like a portal or something like that. So you talk about the void, and I end up looking at the central negative space, but there's so much going on around there. It's kind of a nice overloading on the outside of something that's kind of quite pure inside.